Going into the 2023 offseason, NBA teams knew there weren't too many hot commodities available on the free market. The best available small forward was Dillon Brooks. Hope that puts into perspective this mediocre free agency list. There's only one option, it appears, for those who seek to strengthen their garrison: trading. Coincidentally, the only attractive free agent this offseason was recently traded. Kyrie Irving was the only coveted free agent in this market. He wound up in Dallas after negotiations fell through in regards to his contract extension with the Brooklyn Nets at the beginning of the season, which concluded his tenure there and closed the Durant-Irving saga of the Nets for good. He was traded to the Dallas Mavericks, being paired with the most electrifying young supernova in all of basketball, Luka Doncic. But despite the present talents, the Dallas Mavericks would miss the playoffs. They took a risk trading for Irving, who was only under contract for the remainder of the season. There was speculation he'd leave them to dry, as he was reportedly Hollywood bound. Well, those reports were false, because he ended up re-signing with Dallas, ensuring we, the audience, will get another season of Luka Magic and Knuckle Drew, and maybe they'll make a push for the playoffs, plus some depending on the Mavericks' form. So no superstar like Kyrie is available, and Fred VanVleet is getting $42 million a year. Yeah, no wonder teams would rather trade. And the trade pool certainly isn't shallow. Quite the contrary. Just about any all-star caliber player could wind up on a chopping block if the right deal comes along. When Damian Lillard is demanding a trade, you know the landscape is shifting at the tectonic level. How many players are untouchable currently? There's maybe 5 to 8 guys who are unconditionally untouchable. These are the Giannis Antetokounmpos and the Jason Tatums of the world. And there's another 8 to 10 who are realistically untouchable. Essentially, there aren't any sensible trade offers available in regards to these players. Take Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. He isn't going anywhere unless Joker or Luka come out and burn their team jerseys. So realistically untouchable. There is certainly a correlation between a player's basketball prowess and their untouchability status. The better you are, the higher it is. But it gets interesting when circumstances arise where an all-NBA player becomes available, such as Damian Lillard. And it's even more interesting when an MVP becomes available? You're telling me that right now, the Philadelphia 76ers, Daryl Morey, will not trade the reigning 2024 NBA Most Valuable Player Joel Embiid? Doubt it. The dysfunction that is the current Philadelphia 76ers. The biggest headache in a city that lost a World Series and a Super Bowl in a 3-month span. These are trying times for the city's sports fans. Ain't a lot that's sunny in Philadelphia right now. An embarrassing exit against the Celtics, a dismantlement against the Heat the prior year, and an infamous collapse against the Hawks 2 years ago. They lost all the other years as well. I mean, this team hasn't been back to the finals since Allen Iverson and haven't won one since 1983, which was around the time Michael Jackson dropped Thriller, and the year before LeBron James was born. A perpetual smog of disappointment and failure. Alright, that's a bit too harsh. The 76ers accomplished so much but can never stick the landing. They have one of the premier big men of this generation, but he settles for second round exits and a pity MVP. Embiid is an otherworldly player, but simply can't overtake the few that run ahead of him. As a member of the 76ers organization, his team is constantly underperforming. His star running mates have disappeared in crucial moments. Ben Simmons in Game 7 against Atlanta and James Harden in the closing games against Boston. But if we look at the numbers, Embiid isn't exempt from blame. He hasn't performed to his regular season standards in the playoffs. Embiid is a really good basketball player, but he is not the consensus best big man on the planet. The hierarchy was established when Nikola Jokic reached basketball immortality. And it seems Embiid will be down another superstar teammate as James Harden continues to incinerate his relationship with the organization day by day.
Daryl Morey is a liar, and I will never be a part of an organization that he's a part of. Let me say that again. Daryl Morey is a liar, and I will never be a part of an organization that he's a part of.
He went all the way to China to tell people how much he dislikes Daryl Morey, the general manager. It's obvious he voiced his frustration in this manner willingly, because he repeated the statement like he was reading it off a goddamn teleprompter. So what could he be insinuating when he calls Morey a liar? Let's take a step back and look at the full picture. Morey became the general manager of the Houston Rockets in late spring of 2007. Harden arrived in 2012. So in all his days in Houston, Morey ran the front office. It's likely Morey made promises to his franchise player that didn't go through, considering Houston's constant roster shifting. Players and coaches coming in and out in attempts to synergize with Harden's archetype, starting with Dwight Howard, to Chris Paul, to Russell Westbrook, to John Wall and DeMarcus Cousins, but obviously none of these attempts were fruitful. Harden ends up going to Brooklyn, which turned out to be a misfire because the deadly trio dubbed Scary Hours put in no hours. So he redirects course and heads back to his good pal Daryl. There was that video right after confirmation Harden signed with the Sixers where he jumps out the private jet and embraces Morey. Now, like a year later, Harden vows to never work with the man. What transpired in 11 months that soured their relationship? There's only one plausible explanation that we could deduce since we can't hear the conversations they had. Dating back to last offseason, James Harden took a pay cut of approximately $14 million. This showed Harden's willingness to help the team. That $14 million was meant to bolster Philadelphia's roster, adding more depth to a team with championship aspirations. So, now you're curious, what did President of Basketball Operations Daryl Morey do with this extra cap space? Sign Montrezl Harrell. They'd acquired D'Anthony Melton that offseason. Melton had the second most steals this season, but he was acquired via trade. They also signed PJ Tucker and Daniel House. Doesn't matter if I mentioned they were signed before Harden took his pay cut. I mean, come on now, even if they weren't signed prior to that, this is the best available. And I hold no bias towards James Harden. The man has his faults. If there's one player who can personally blame himself for the narratives that surround him, it's James Harden. He's etched all of them with the way he's handled his situations. His play style was a black hole that hindered the Houston Rockets' chances of winning a championship. Their best years were when Chris Paul held the point, and these were the same years when Harden was scoring transcendently. That scoring meant nil, however. Even Kobe Bryant stated as such. But with that said, last year Harden took a historic team-friendly deal at the request of the GM of his team, who was also his acquaintance. After this season, does it look like the Philadelphia 76ers are championship contenders? From Harden's point of view, was it worth missing out on almost $50 million that year? That's most likely what burned his friendship with Morey. Also, there's reports that when Harden took that pay cut, Morey promised him a long-term deal in the future. A deal which James Harden has yet to receive, so that's more fuel to the fire. But if James Harden winds up being shipped off somewhere else, only one man will suffer. Once he's gone, Joel Embiid will be left in the debris of the aftermath. After so many failures over and over, a man grows weary. Is the thought of Embiid wanting an exit out of Philly inconceivable? He turned 29 in March. His body has proven that it is incapable of withstanding the rigors of playing this demanding style of basketball. He flops purposely as a method for avoiding harder impact on his legs. This dude is playing on borrowed time. Does Embiid's body have the capacity to play at an MVP level for the next 5 years? The answer is that's unlikely. With time dwindling for the Kansas big man, wouldn't it be wise to look for alternate routes in his quest to win a championship? Embiid certainly feels that way. I just want to win a championship, whatever it takes. I don't know where that's going to be, whether it's in Philly or anywhere else. Most likely Embiid is staying put, but if there were to be a blockbuster move, there's about 3 organizations that could realistically acquire him: the New York Knicks, the New Orleans Pelicans, and the Miami Heat. The Knicks are coming off a fantastic year, finishing with the 5th best record in the Eastern Conference. The new year saw Julius Randle make the All-Star team, while guard Jalen Brunson had a season worthy of All-Star consideration. Emmanuel Quickley and the other younger players took a leap, with Quick finishing as the runner-up for 6th Man of the Year. With plenty of draft capital, the Knicks could swing for the fences, possibly parting with Julius Randle, who Knicks fans already aren't fond of because of his playoff struggles, along with RJ Barrett, who hasn't shown enough growth to make himself untradeable. They may have to add Quickley or Quentin Grimes to sweeten the deal, but when the return is Joel Embiid, that's not a hard bargain. If the New Orleans Pelicans wish to seize the opportunity and steal an MVP, they have plenty of assets to make that a reality. Their roster is amusingly constructed for value in the trade market, with a combination of young, desirable talents and older players with larger contracts who still hold some value. The big fish scenario could see Zion be shipped to Philly in exchange, but that's unlikely. We could, however, see Valanciunas or McCollum plus Herb Jones or Trey Murphy or Dyson Daniels, and an enclave of picks get swapped. Finally, the Miami Heat, the most fascinating scenario amongst the three. The biggest headline this offseason has been Damian Lillard's seemingly guaranteed move to the Heat, except it's been over a month and the Trailblazers are playing keep away. Miami's done everything in their power to get it done besides sacrificing Adebayo. Every pick they got, getting multiple teams involved. I mean, they are begging the Blazers to take Tyler Hero. But if Portland is playing hardball, the deal might fall through, in which case Miami would have to turn towards another superstar. And if Joel Embiid is available, Bam Adebayo is absolutely on the table. Going into the 2023-24 season, could we see Jimmy Butler and Joel Embiid as the faces of the Miami Heat? That would signify devastation for the rest of the league. Something to think about. Thanks for watching.